The all-time leader in points versus the all-time leader in career points per game. The all-time leader in playoff points versus the all-time leader in career playoff points per game. They both have the resume to be considered the greatest scorer, but which one deserves the crown? That would depend on each person's criteria. Everyone views scoring greatness differently. Some people value the fact that a player can score from anywhere on the floor, or the ability to consistently convert on difficult shots. Those two highlight more the eye test and their actual skill. For some, they value the numbers more and how efficient they are. It's up to each person to determine which one is more important to them. But if we combine all these factors, we can come up with an answer based on facts and logic. Let's start with each player's scoring skill, or the number of ways they can score. At their best, we wouldn't describe them as one-dimensional. There are a number of ways that they could put the ball through the basket. No matter what side of the debate you're on, we can all agree that they are very exciting players when they attack the rim. They both have utilized their athleticism to punish defenders under the rim. LeBron would rely on his strength much more to score in the paint. The combination of his size, speed, and strength made him an unfair one-on-one matchup. Jordan also had an incredibly quick first step. The combination of his jumping ability and hang time allowed him to score many points in the painted area. This unique set of skills made him a much more crafty finisher under the rim. His layup game was absolutely insane. It wouldn't be far-fetched to say that no one in the history of the league was a more acrobatic finisher. It takes a certain skill to convert on shots like these. Although LeBron has had some nice highlights himself, he's simply not at his level. Now let's move up to the post. Jordan was always extremely effective while operating at the post. He was, and still is, the greatest post-up guard in history. If you watch the games, there is no series of screens to find him a mismatch. He didn't need one. He knew how to use his body to create space. He had impeccable footwork. He knew how to keep his defenders off balance. He understood angles and the timing of the double team so he can get his shot off before it arrived. For those last 3 titles he won, his post-up game was his biggest weapon. That's something that's never been said about LeBron. Although he was efficient whenever he decided to post up, he didn't embrace this area of the game for many years. Take for instance the 2011 finals when he admitted to Bleacher Report back in 2015 that he needed to work on his post game to get closer to the basket. He would often have a smaller defender on him, but he never exploited those mismatches. He would later develop a reliable post-up game in the following years. Remember in Game 2 of the 2018 semifinals against the Raptors when he made 7 fadeaway jumpers. This is something that he now has in his bag, but that's not his bread and butter. When you're guarding LeBron, you know you're going to be fighting a series of picks. You have to try to get under as best as you can so he doesn't blow by the defense for a rim-shattering dunk. Michael didn't need those gimmicks to score. He knew he could score over any and every one. You didn't know if he was going to drive, post up, pull up, elevate, go left, or go right. He had a million ways to score. It's why he remains one of the greatest one-on-one scorers ever. And no one used his strength better than he did. The numbers suggest that we've never seen a more dominant scorer since Wilt Chamberlain roamed the courts. Even though LeBron has played 7 more seasons and nearly 500 more games, he is still behind MJ in various scoring categories. For example, he is still behind him in career 30-point games. In fact, Michael averaged 30.1 points per game for his career. He averaged over 30 points in 7 of his 15 seasons. That's nearly 50% of the time. LeBron has only done it in 3 of the 21 full seasons he's played. That's 14% of the time. For 40-point games, LeBron is behind him by 77. For 50-point games, he's behind him by 17. For 60-point games, Jordan has 4 in the regular season, while LeBron has done it once. In the playoffs, the discrepancy is even more obvious. There were 9 times where Jordan scored more than 50 points. LeBron has scored over 50 points once. Then there are 29 additional games where Jordan scored at least 40 points. To LeBron's credit, he has had at least 40 points in the playoffs 28 times. But that's not all. Michael averaged 33.4 points while playing in 179 games. LeBron is currently at 28.4 points. He's also had 5 playoff series where he averaged at least 40 points. He has 5 of the 7 highest points per game average for a playoff series. He even averaged that many points in the finals. That's right, he averaged 41 points on 51% shooting in the 1993 finals. LeBron has never accomplished such a scoring feat. The numbers clearly favor Michael as the more dominant scorer. But if you're on the LeBron side of the debate, you would surely bring up that this has more to do with MJ's aggressive scoring nature. Michael was a volume scorer, while LeBron is a pass-first player. How many times have we heard this false narrative? I don't know what your definition of a pass-first player is. For me, it's someone who facilitates more than he shoots. It's someone who has more assists than field goals. That is something that cannot be said about LeBron. He has had 6 seasons of averaging over 20 field goal attempts. His career high is 23.1 shot attempts per game. For his career, he's averaging 19.6 field goal attempts. In what universe is that a pass-first player? That is the definition of a scorer's mentality. You don't get to be the all-time leader in points, field goal attempts, and missed shots if you're a pass-first player. That's not how it works. Does he look to facilitate more than Jordan? Yes, that would be the more accurate thing to say, but it's not by as much as you think. If you're on the LeBron side of the debate, you would also bring up the difference in efficiency. He has a higher career field goal percentage average. Although he is a more efficient scorer, we shouldn't confuse this with being the better shooter. Just like we wouldn't say that Giannis is the better shooter over Curry, just because he has a higher field goal percentage. It's all about play style. As we mentioned earlier, he relied heavily on his athleticism for years to score in the painted area. So what did teams do to stop him? They would go under on screens, crowd the paint, and force him to take jump shots. By taking away his strength, they highlighted his biggest weakness. Take, for example, some of the testimonials from his past competitors. Speaking of the 2007 finals, Manu Ginobili said that LeBron wasn't the best scorer back then. He was a great player, of course, but he wasn't the biggest threat. When has that ever been said about MJ? Manu was only being truthful. For that series, LeBron converted on 17.9% of his jump shots. For the 2008 semifinals, James Posey said that he wasn't a great shooter. The game plan was to give him a step or two with a late contest for his jump shot. They tried to give him open looks to entice him to take outside shots. For the 2011 finals, Caron Butler mentioned that they implemented a 1-3-1 zone to force him to take jump shots. In the 2013 finals, what many people consider his peak season, he went 30 of 80 from shots outside the painted area. That is according to the shot tracking data. In the 2015 season, the data also states that he converted on 35% of his mid-range jumpers. This did not improve during the course of the year, as he shot 41.7% during the playoffs. This isn't to say that LeBron hasn't had his moments. There have been 2 seasons where he averaged over 40% from the 3. Now, you have to respect his jump shot, and he could get very streaky. He's made drastic improvements in this aspect. However, we wouldn't describe him as a pure shooter. On the other hand, Michael was getting recognition for being one of the game's top perimeter shooters. We're not saying that he was a better shooter than Reggie Miller or Chris Mullin, but among volume scorers, there is no comparison. For example, check out what Jack McCallum wrote for Sports Illustrated in 1991. Quote, "Jordan is now a better shooter than Larry Bird. Not from long range, but from 20 feet in. End of quote. The consensus was that Michael was an excellent perimeter shooter. Here's how else we know this. In the 1995-96 season, he shot 42.7% from the three in the regular season and 40.3% in the playoffs. We understand that the NBA shortened the three-point line for a very brief period during this time. They shortened it to 22 feet. The three-point line now is at 23 feet 9 inches from the center of the basket, except in the corners, where it's 22 feet away. So for one season, you could say that he shot corner threes at a 42.7% rate. Isn't that very efficient? That's because he was a pure shooter. I mean, have you ever seen Michael do this? Would a pure shooter ever be guilty of this? He was also automatic from the mid-range, aka the least efficient shot, according to our beloved league mathematicians. That applies to nearly everyone but MJ. Let's look at the numbers. The shot tracking data only goes as far back as the 1996-97 season. As his chart indicates, courtesy of ESPN, he was the best mid-range scorer on the planet. Out of the 1,100 mid-range shots he took, he converted on 49.5%. Just for comparison, Reggie Miller hit 42.4% of his mid-range jumpers on 484 attempts. This is what Jordan did while taking highly contested shots. That's why the team discouraged players from taking mid-range jumpers. You're not going to get easy looks. It takes a highly skilled and precise shooter to put up those kind of numbers while taking the least efficient shot in the game. And this was not considered Michael's peak. Expect those numbers to be higher if this was tracked before his first retirement. We should also recognize that the late 90s and early 2000s were considered the defensive era. The pace was slower, the zone defense was prevalent, and there was more leeway in implementing a more physical approach. It was hard for teams and players to score at a high level. Of course, Michael was the exception. Here's how we know this. For the 1993-94 season to the 1999-2000 season, there was only one player that averaged over 30 points. That was Jordan in 1996 when he averaged 30.4 points on 49.5% shooting. Allen Iverson would be the next player to reach the 30-point mark, but he was nowhere near as efficient. It wasn't until the 2008-09 season that Dwayne Wade scored as many points and was as efficient. By that time, the league had made rule changes to increase scoring. It wasn't easy being a volume shooter during this time, but Michael adjusted his game to dominate the post and mid-range area. We have seen plenty of examples where LeBron couldn't do the same. He was nowhere near as effective. That's because his overall skill and shooting capabilities can't compare. Scoring simply doesn't come as naturally as it did for Michael. That's not to say that LeBron isn't a great scorer. You don't become the all-time scoring leader if you're not a skilled scorer. But that record says more about his longevity than anything else. Nobody would say that Karl Malone is a better scorer than Kevin Durant just because he has more career points. The same applies to this debate. And for me, it's not close. Everything indicates that Michael Jordan is the better scorer. But what about you all? Who do you think is a greater scorer and why? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.